wonderful people all over this country. She is a beautiful
Guyana will become the next Dubai, and we, the citizens of Guyana, are super excited to benefit from our homeland the same way the citizens of Dubai benefit from theirs.
This is what life is like for citizens from the
Guyana will become the next Dubai.
with wonderful people all over this country. She is a beautiful Guyana.
Welcome to Globespan 24/7 as we bring you our Monday night program from New York, the Caribbean, of course, around the world, and indeed Guyana. We want to thank Nohar Singh for making this platform available, and of course to Ryan Gobin, our technical specialist tonight. We want to thank you, our viewers, for being here with us tonight, and we thank you for your comments. We don't agree with all of them, but you know, it's a free world we live in, and you do have a right to post your comments. So we want to welcome your comments as well. Just I ask you, be circumspect to each other. Don't get into the area of demonizing each other. Just respectfully disagree, but you don't have to demonize the person. That's our humble plea to you guys. This evening, we are talking about the role of the Speaker and the Member of Parliament and MPs in Parliament and what the future holds for Guyana. I know the Speaker don't necessarily make policies. He's there to be an arbiter of what is presented before him. So we have a lot of discussion tonight. And to help us through that, of course, the Honorable Speaker, Mr. Mansour Nadir. Mr. Speaker, welcome again to our program. You're muted. We're not hearing you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Good evening to all of you, also your viewers.
Thank you. And of course, my co-host, Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose, you're not in the US, are you?
No, someplace hovering over the Atlantic somewhere.
Welcome.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome, Mr. Speaker, and welcome to all our listeners, far and wide.
Mr. Speaker, since the last time we met, a lot of things happening in Guyana, a lot of things is happening, and you are the center of a lot of them. Some of the Guyanese people think that you're a very partisan speaker, something you're the best speaker. I'm not going to judge that tonight. We're just going to ask you what is going on in Parliament now as we speak. What has been the events over the past year since we last spoke?
Of course, a number of things have happened. We have had earlier in the year, and we had a couple of significant pieces of being and passing those. Along with that, we've had Speaker and another Parliament replacing member Mr. Narmla. There are a lot of questions being asked by members of Parliament, and we 20 questions at the last sitting being answered orally and also in writing. So it's, while we may not have a Parliament that meets every week, a lot has happened and transpired in the last couple of months. We have seen in the last sitting the passage of the Radiation Safety Bill. That particular bill now is providing the legal framework for us to deal with radiation, workers, patients, the handling of radioactive material, licensing board, is something that for a long time. Of course, we're going to be and we're going to have to tread delicately with respect to that, but that bill was successfully piloted. piloted. A particular piece of legislation went through the special select committee system, a system where the Parliament will send the bill to this committee comprising members of all sides of the House, and they will sit and come up with a piece of legislation. Many times that is a consensus piece of legislation. We saw that successful passage last Thursday, and then there was legislation passed on Thursday or coming out of Thursday's sitting, and that was the single window system of applications for approval, etc. And this is a one-stop agency.
Mr. Speaker, can I stop? Sorry, Ryan, we're getting not a good feedback from the speaker's video. So I know, is there a technical problem there?
Should I use a microphone? Must be the feedback from my microphone.
I'm not sure which one is it, Ryan. You gotta help us.
Give me 1 second. Let me get an earphone.
Okay, Mr. Speaker.
Perhaps stop your sound from coming through. I think the feedback would be from your sound.
It's not so much the sound, it's the broken up. You're broken. We're not hearing you all the time. You're in and out. And apparently your video is not, now we're seeing, your screen went still as well. So something is wrong with your internet connection, I believe.
You hear me now?
We're hearing you, yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, Ryan says it's the internet problem, yeah.
It's the internet. Okay. Are we public internet? So that bandwidth is being shared among so many persons.
Okay.
But is that feel better, Ryan?
Okay, go on, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, I was mentioning that we had two pieces of legislation passed last Thursday, and that one, radiation safety bill, providing the legal framework for us dealing with all forms of radiation. It'll be helpful, some great presentations being made by all sides. That bill went to a special select committee. For that committee as a consensus piece of legislation, and it saw the support of all sides of the House. The second piece of legislation that was extremely important, and that one was the single window for building permits at the Central Housing and Planning Authority, Housing and Water. And what that piece of legislation does, it provides the mechanism for applications for permits and related approvals all go to one place. And instead of you have to go to police, fire, NDC, CHPA, City Council, Environmental Protection Agency, a number of different regulatory agencies. And many times when the applicant go to fire says, before you come to me, you have to get EPA. Then EPA will say, before you come to me, you have to get the NDC. And the builder, the homeowner, will have to go through a series of applications. Now everything goes to Central Housing and Planning, and there's a mechanism there for one application, get all the necessary approvals. And it includes, if approvals coming from the different agencies, if those approvals are delayed, mechanism that within a certain period, the approvals are deemed, even though somebody didn't to have been approved. And that allows for the system to work faster. So if it doesn't work, if you don't, the applicant will get the approval. So they have, this is a very interesting piece of legislation which will assist in moving our faster, at the same time not compromising certain aspects of safety, environment, and other regulations. In fact, I have made a visit with the Honorable President, Dr. Barjagio, and 6, 7, I think it was, and I in Rajasthan, and it's a similar piece of legislation. So that is important piece. We also had 2 important financial papers coming to the House. One was to deal with, in fact, both were to deal with the inflows of the revenue and the allocated expenditure. I'm speaking of are the revenues that came in from the sale of carbon credits. As you may, we have had an agreement with Guyana country to have been paid carbon capture, its work of removing carbon environment and its carbon storage capacity. So HES and the government of Guyana, the facility that is monitoring the carbon credit program globally, we have agreed that Guyana will be paid $750 million US for 10 years, and 15% of this money is allocated directly to Amerindian community. 250 communities, Amerindian communities that will benefit and are benefiting directly. So we had 2 financial papers that were able to bring those money into and to expend them. So the Amerindian communities, I think, were getting, I can't remember the amount, I have it in my records here though, but communities were getting from, I think, 10 to 30 million, $35 million directly. And they had to be village proposal that was presented, and a lot of the communities did that. So that money came in and was allocated to the communities, and now we had to have the supplementary estimates so that we can put money in and also expend it. There was also another financial paper that the government will spend some of that money, and the finance minister at the time, last Thursday, mentioned that because of the other issues, the intensity of the has increased. So when I speaking of that's any quantity of water coming down in a particular period, in that downpour becoming more intense, and the government is considering cutting Hope-type canals in Regions 5 and in Region 6. Those are very prone to substantial flooding when this type of rainfall occurs. So that money will be used with the effects of change in terms of adaptation and forms of mitigation. In the last couple of months since the budget, a number of other significant pieces of legislation and regulation passed. At the last sitting too, the government removed the 20% duty on cellular phones. So cellular phones come into Guyana duty-free and VAT-free.
Okay. Mr. Speaker,
The duty on cell phones were...
Mr. Speaker, we are still having problem with your connection. I don't know, you said the broadband. Are you in the Parliament building? I mean, because it's really not coming through clear at all.
Out and re-sign in. I'm actually broadcasting from Turks and Caicos, where we're attending a conference.
Oh, so it's not Guyana is a problem, it's Turks and Caicos. Is it possible we can, Ryan, maybe the speaker talk to us on the phone by better reception? What do you think? Because for our audience, you're speaking and then we're hearing you and it's in and out, which is really not good reception. Dr. Rose?
Maybe I can change the look.
Ryan, could the speaker broadcast on his phone? Let's see if it's going to be better.
An audience, we are very sorry. The speaker is overseas.
Yes, it will be better that way.
Okay, so are we getting the speaker back now?
Just give us a minute.
Okay, in the meantime, the speaker was talking about all the development in Parliament, as you have heard, all the bills that are passed and what is going on with the government action, some of the financial papers, and we want to go through a little more detail in that as we continue the discussion tonight. But when the speaker comes back, Dr. Rose will take over. Mr. Speaker, you're back on?
Well, I'm still on the computer. I'm just now trying to sign in on this cell phone.
Dr. Rose keep complaining about Guyana internet, but like Turks and Caicos Island is even worse.
It's only about 3 islands or 4 having proper. Jamaica has a good internet system. I've been there many times. Barbados as well, Trinidad, and I think St. Lucia. But the rest of the islands are, lousy. Cuba is nothing.
So you're at Convention Hall, Mr. Speaker, or you're in the hotel there with the broadband?
I'm at the hotel.
So maybe everybody using the broadband here, that's why. Okay, in the meantime, Dr. Rose, you want to, I'm sure the speaker is hearing us.
Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
You hearing me now? My first question to you, and this coming from our listeners as well, do you have a budget to run Parliament? How much is that budget and what it is being used for, if you do have one?
Testing. Yes, we do have a budget. How is that? Better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we do have a budget. The Parliament has a budget of approximately 2 billion Guyana dollars. And how that is used. The Parliament budget covers all the salaries and allowances for members of Parliament and also the ministers of government. We cover the sittings of the National Assembly. We cover overseas visits of members of Parliament to conferences. We are part of many associations, the Interparliamentary Union, which is an association of 178 countries. We are part of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, which has 53 countries and which also has the Caribbean branch, and we are currently at a meeting of the Caribbean branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. We are also a member of the Parliamericas, which is the assemblies of parliaments of the OS countries. So those are the three principal parliamentary organizations which we are involved with. We also have one-to-one relationships with the Parliament of British Columbia and also the Parliament of Suriname. And we do have requests, engagements, discussions ongoing for other bilateral arrangements. For example, Georgia, the Organization of Islamic States, United Arab Emirates, Ghana, Chile. A number of different groups have approached us to establish China and India to establish bilateral relations between the two parliaments. And in this day of globalization and global action, one wants to ensure that at all levels, the parliamentary level and the executive, that we can have relationships and friends all around the world. So the primary responsibility for external relations is that of the executive, the government of Guyana. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and His Excellency the President and the Cabinet conduct those business on behalf of the state. At the parliamentary level, we have the engagements parliament to parliament, parliamentary group to parliament, and that's where we come in. But as I've said, relationships at all levels will ensure that Guyana's voice is heard around the world, and more particularly, we can engage in agreements, discussions, treaties that benefit our people and whoever is our partner. And the more contact we have, it is easier for more understanding and, in particular, doing more business. Because at the end of the day, it's not how many friends Mansour has across Parliament, but what Parliament to Parliament, government to government can do to uplift the people of each other countries. And this is why these big engagements happen. These big engagements happen, and I am confident that in the end it belongs to the benefit. Guyana in particular needs to maintain as much of these relationships as it can, especially in view of the fact that we have said we are going to settle issues internationally, especially border issues, by a dialogue, cooperation, and agreement based on international standards and UN principles. And so this is very important for us. A consistent position over the past 6 decades our country has taken, and in particular now, it is even more vital because the resources which is going to redound to the benefit of our people in particular are resources that are being challenged, and the other resources that we previously were noted for, challenged by Venezuela.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, and I'm getting all these questions from our audiences, and you're the best person to answer this. They're asking me the question, and it is true. In Canada, we have a parliament. Jamaica, we have a parliament. But why we have a parliament and we have a national assembly? Those two words are used interchangeably. Why is that? Britain has a parliament.
Because all the parliaments comprise the head of state and the members of parliament, the members of the National Assembly. So the National Assembly is the institution where the 65 elected members, along with the nominated members, sit to pass bills. The Parliament comprises His Excellency the President and the National Assembly. So we use Parliament to mean the National Assembly, but technically the Parliament is His Excellency the President and the National Assembly. And so the lawmaking function is the Parliament, meaning a bill has to come to the National Assembly, debated there and passed. And then that bill goes to His Excellency to be assented to. So when a bill is passed in the National Assembly, it goes to the President. And when the President assents to it, it becomes an act of Parliament. Before that, it is just a bill passed by the National Assembly. So in your system, you have Congress and the Senate. So the bills will go through two institutions, and then it reaches to the President's desk, and the President can refuse to sign it and send it back. But when the President signs, then that legislation that came through the two houses and signed by the President becomes law. So the lawmaking function is the President and the National Assembly. Those two institutions comprise Parliament.
Jamaica and a number of other countries, Canada as well, do have a Senate, just like the United States. Parliament.
Yes, well, well, their Parliament, it's the same, because in Canada, they're still under the Queen. They have a Governor General who is the Queen's representative. And so when the bills pass through the House of Commons in Ottawa and the Senate, then the Governor General has to sign off on it. That's the Parliament. The two institutions for debating the bill, and then the head of state. The Prime Minister in Canada or in Jamaica, they are not the head of state. In both countries, you still have a Governor General, the Queen's representative. So technically, in Canada and in Jamaica, the King now has to assent to every bill passed, and the King's representative in those countries are the Governor Generals.
Okay, but those are just rubber stamp. Now, Mr. Speaker, in any debate in Parliament, are MPs, opposition MPs, have the same rights in a debate as ministers, meaning that they're given the same time as a minister is being given in any debate?
Yes, the standing orders are quite clear. If an opposition member moves a motion, that member will have, as a mover of the motion, 45 minutes to make a presentation and can get an additional 15 minutes to so do. When a government minister moves a bill, the government minister gets 45 minutes for the original presentation and 15 minutes extension. Other members of Parliament get up to 30 minutes plus an extension of 15. So the speaking time is the same for every member of Parliament except the mover of a motion or a bill. However, the two sides can sit, and many times the government chief whip and the opposition chief whip will sit, and they will develop a speakers list, and they will say that every member will get 15 minutes to speak on this bill, except the mover will get 20 minutes, right? And a 5-minute extension. So This happens sometimes, a lot of times, and outside of I being given a list of speakers on any motion or any bill, then I revert to standing orders. And the standing orders basically say that whoever catches the speaker's eye first, he shall call. So, and we use government and opposition alternatingly. But many times I do get a list which is agreed upon by the chief whip of the government and the chief whip of the opposition. And so I would normally have, and I would monitor the time and to ensure that no one gets more time than the other.
Tonight, I'm not even getting a chance to ask you questions from myself. I'm being bombarded by questions from our viewers. This means that you're very popular. They're asking, the question the viewers are asking,
Or unpopular.
the way the members of parliament are behaving, do you think they're setting a good example for the youths in Guyana?
I've said it before in your program that militancy is one of the weapons at the disposal of politicians. And how you choose to exercise militancy will determine the amount of respect you get. So if rules are set up and you choose to break the rules, being militant and breaking the rules, you will get the admiration of some of your hardcore people. But in politics, many times, it's the undecided, the person who are not committed to one side or the other, who are judging you and who will make the difference. So many times when we choose to go militant, disruptive, when you feel you're keeping your base together and people see that you're really fighting for them regardless, you also alienate people who could be potential supporters of you. And so a politician has to use judgment, and in using the judgment, they will decide, I have to get attention this way, even if it means a penalty. And so we had two instances where that happened in the last sitting. A person who should know better, the honorable member, Roysdale Ford, stood up. If you want to do something in Parliament, you have to seek leave of the Parliament or the Speaker. You just can't stand up and do whatever you feel like doing, right? And some people see that as powerful and defiant and popular. So I say, once we have the rules, observe the rules. And my job is to apply the rules fairly. As you said, speaking time is set out in the rules. It's no different for a government opposition or opposition person. The only difference is the mover of a motion or a bill. They have a longer period of time to make the presentation. So disruption is part of the menu of measures which people have. And there are parliaments all over the world that are extremely disruptive. Someone sent me recently the Parliament of St. Vincent, where there was a shouting match between the Prime Minister Ralph Gonzalez and somebody else. So it's part of the occupational hazard you have to deal with. And sometimes you can be very reactive and want to punish, but sometimes better judgment will prevail. And you absorb the blows so that the business of the house can move forward. And for me, the important thing is that the business of the house moves forward, regardless of how I am judged.
One final question before my colleague Charles comes back on. Mr. Speaker, is it true, and this again has been sent to me by our viewers, that a member of parliament, if he or she wishes to vote against his or her party, let's say a member of APNU wants to vote against APNU presented a bill, or the PP, a member of PP want to vote against the government's bill, is it true that that MP should send a letter at least 24 hours in advance to the Speaker?
No, not true. The member of Parliament can exercise their conscience and vote how they feel. They don't have to inform the Speaker how they wish to vote on any motion. At the time of voting, the member of Parliament would exercise that vote without informing anybody. If the member of Parliament breaks ranks with the party and it's a situation where it was crucial, that member of Parliament could be recalled. And we've seen an example of it. In fact, the current leader of the opposition was one of the MPs that they said the recall bill came in for. But his party can recall a person who might not be voting in congruence with the
maybe I
party's
could
wish.
put the question wrong to you. If a Speaker wants to break rank, does he or she have to inform the Speaker in advance?
No,
Okay.
no, doesn't.
Charles?
Mr. Speaker, what would you consider matters of national importance?
Riot breaks out. Seawall breakaway, 20,000 people flooded out. A natural disaster. So it must be urgent. Urgency is the issue, and of national importance. Those are the two elements that you have to judge: urgency and national importance. And of course, almost anything to do with the state has national importance. But the issue is urgency. So let's say, for example, a minister went out and promised 3 months ago that he will provide school buses to transport kids from Chicory Dam to X place. Transportation for kids going to school and special activities is very important. But let's say that particular promise was not fulfilled in 2 months. A person can't come to the house and say, well, this is urgent national importance. So there are other mechanisms for addressing that. And so a member can ask a question. A member can go to a press conference and chide the minister. But that wouldn't qualify as urgent, because its urgency has to be happening almost right now, immediately and ongoing. And technically, little is being done to address the important national issue, right? So urgency and national importance are the two elements that we have to consider. And so there are two items on the agenda of Parliament, the standing orders, under which this would fall. And there is actually a heading which says matters of urgent national importance. So a member can stand up and seek leave under that heading to move a matter of urgent national importance. So let's say a natural disaster happened affecting X amount of people, and we have a sitting of the House at the same time. It would be apt for someone to raise an issue of that, and in that case it would be allowed. And if the Parliament is meeting at 2 o'clock, then there is a time frame. You can now, the Speaker will say, yes, I accept, the debate is set for 5 o'clock. To 10 o'clock. So then people will have an opportunity. If it's an opposition question that comes up, then both sides have an opportunity to gather their arguments, gather their facts, and present them during the debate. Also, you have oral questions without notice. So technically, for you to ask a question, either in writing, for reply in writing or orally, questions come in, they are vetted against the standing orders, and then they are answered orally or in writing. But again, something urgent happens, and a member can stand up right now and say, last 24 hours, we had this particular incident happen, and as a matter of oral question without notice, I want to ask the Minister of Happenings about this particular incident, and that would qualify. Because we have a sitting, it's now, the matter is urgent in the sense it's happening now or happened a day or two before, very important to the nation, and so that particular question, without notice, could be allowed.
Would you consider? Sorry, go on.
So there are a lot of opportunities in the standing order for members of parliament to use to represent their constituencies and also to bring the government to account.
Would you consider matters that affect our environment as matter of national importance?
Again, it has to be urgent. Oh my happens, let's say that's a matter of urgent national importance, right? An oil spill could happen, urgent, you know, and so, yes.
Because, well, I asked that question because, as you know, Mr. Speaker, the opposition asked to move a motion on the gas to shore plant, and you rejected that motion. Isn't that a matter of national importance when we're spending over $2 billion on that project?
Okay, but I don't want to say confusing. Two issues. The question on the pipeline was also a court matter. And under the sub judice standard rule, once it's filed before a judge, we don't debate it in the House. So that particular incident you raised is in the court. The other one, which was in the court, which I rejected, was the ruling of Justice Kissoon. And for me, that wasn't urgent because Justice Kissoon had given the parties 30 days. And at the same time, there was a matter filed in court. And not only filed, a judge was assigned to hear it. And the member who moved that matter knew it. He knew the matter was filed because the matter was filed the day before. And he tried to grandstand and say this is a matter of urgent national importance. But for me, even if the matter wasn't filed in court, the urgency element was not there because Justice Kissoon had given 30 days to the parties to bring that matter to remedy. And many times we don't, as Speaker, you don't want to go and conduct the business of the House in public. While the business of the House is public, is broadcast. To do the discussion and argue with people in public, I would not bring the Speaker's chair to descend to that.
So we're saying that anything that is sub judice, that cannot be discussed in our parliament.
Right.
National Assembly. Okay.
And we have And we have agreed, and I have applied the principle that once it's filed, a judge is assigned to the matter then. But we just don't file a matter and say, well, it's in court. Because you can file a matter and it comes out and gets thrown out right away. So it got to be before a judge.
Okay.
Got to be before a judge.
Mr. Speaker, since you became Speaker, how many motions was moved by the opposition was allowed to be discussed and debated in Parliament?
I actually have the record. If I had an idea it was going to come up, I would have given you the actual numbers. But we do keep a track of all the questions that are asked, how many are allowed, and how many are not. And so once a motion is in order and it doesn't violate any provision of the standing order, I allow it. So when a motion comes in or a question, then the clerk would read that against the standing orders, and then the clerk would give an advice. So the first filter is the clerk applying the standing orders to the question or motion. And in some countries, they say your preamble should not be more than 200 words. And sometimes some of our motions got 5 pages of preamble. And when you look at the preamble has to be a statement of fact, not your speculative arguments that you're going to present in Parliament. So if a motion comes from Charles Sugrim, opposition member for Canal Number 1 to the House, if a motion comes and it says, Canal Polder has only one drainage canal, and I know that to be inaccurate because they have interlocking canals that will do drainage, and so I can't allow that. I can't allow half facts to go through as facts because your preamble sets out what is fact. And so you have to read all of these very carefully, quoting what a minister says in newspapers is not technically accurate to use. But many times when we have rejected some of that, people have actually gotten the Department of Public Information release, which is an official printed document, and say, here's what the minister. So I have to allow that. So it sounds that, oh, the speaker just rejects, and not so. The speaker also has the power to amend. If you ask a question, the speaker has the power to amend that question. And I have chosen not to do that. I have chosen to say to the clerk, send this back and tell them to get it in the right format. I don't want to, because that's another criticism the chair will get, the speaker will get. So I prefer to say it doesn't fit. The clerk is there and the staff to advise members on how to present your questions and your motion. Use the resource persons that you have. And so I don't do the amending, I send it back. And when it goes back, the time doesn't start when you presented the first inaccurate, not formatted question or motion. The time starts when you bring the proper thing. So a person will say, well, I sent in a motion to the speaker 2 years ago. Yes, that's true. But it was rejected 2 days after. And it came back a month after, or a month before the hearing. And then people will make a, so I just leave ignorance where it is with the person.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, the president talked about one Guyana, and I think he's genuine in that. But how would you reconcile that the PPP in Parliament, in National Assembly, voted a member as deputy speaker who have no experience at all in parliamentary affairs? We had Lennox Schumann was the former deputy speaker. Now we have Asha Kisoon as the deputy speaker with absolutely no parliamentary experience. Where is this one Guyana we're talking about?
I don't see the nexus between one Guyana and the deputy speaker, first of all. And so I would make a general comment that experience is something that teaches wisdom. And at the same time, experience can be exercised in almost any situation. Well, the biggest criticism that I have faced as speaker was that the speaker has no experience. So that's the first question I had to face. And the second being the speaker is not a lawyer, right? But making judgments, analyzing facts, weighing one side against the other, looking at facts to make judgments is an everyday process in the lives of every single man, woman, and child. And so we're not shooting in the dark. We have our rules, the standing orders. We have a compendium of international rules from the Commonwealth that we can refer to. And we also have perhaps one of the most experienced clerks in the English-speaking Caribbean to rely on for guidance. So I think anybody, a newbie, a rookie, a freshie, whatever, can come and sit in Parliament. Look how many persons never had an experience as a member of Parliament, and they are in this current Parliament and doing extremely well. And so I don't necessarily subscribe.
I know there's not nexus, and you're right, Mr. Speaker. There's no nexus between, Mr. Schuman and Ms. Kissoon, Dr. Kissoon, and being Deputy Speaker. But my contention is that many Guyanese I've talked to say that why the president is talking about one Guyana, and there are many members in the main opposition, if they're following custom and practice, who has the experience to be Deputy Speaker. Let's say, for instance, there's a hurricane that strikes up and you can't leave Turk and Caicos Island for the next month. And there's Parliament. Can Dr. Kissoon be an effective speaker, or she got to keep checking with the clerk? And that's what I'm saying. That, I mean, and again, Dr. Kissoon is a very brilliant girl. She's a brilliant lady. But I'm saying that, we preach one thing and then we do something else. But that's a different discussion. Mr. Speaker, I know when the opposition tampered with the maize, they were expelled, and I think that was some people think it's justifiable. Something was too harsh a treatment, but at the same time they look at Mr. Dharamlal and say you didn't sanction him when he used some words that was not to be used in Parliament. Why you didn't sanction him?
I think people have selective hearing. The Parliament, when a particular word was used, was suspended, and the gentleman was asked to apologize, which he did immediately. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Good. The mace is not, the mace incident was an assault on Parliament, assault on the authority of the Speaker, and physically assaulting the Speaker too. This mace wasn't just picked up and walked out. This was a pushing, shoving, and dragging match. If I didn't lose the mace, I'd have been tumbling with that chair over. And that was deliberate. So maybe some people say, it was a fall or two or a slap or two, turn the other cheek. True. And I have tools at my disposal to ensure order and discipline, and I apply them whenever. I apply them based on the severity of the incident. And the Speaker himself just don't apply it. We have a system of doing it.
Mr. Speaker, I want two more questions for Dr. Rose come on. One is that the government used the majority and changed the standing order for the holding of parliamentary committees. So we know the Public Accounts Committee cannot sit unless there is a certain amount of government representative there. And we have seen since that bill was passed, many of the hearings could not have been held. In your view, is that a good thing for democracy?
The government of the day has some amount of flexibility. And whenever you're managing anything, you'd have to look at all the challenges, you do your SWOT analysis, and you get your prescription ready and you apply that prescription. So that's within the government's right. And it's not the only committee that has a formula like that. The Parliamentary Management Committee has 5 persons on the government side, 5 on the opposition, with yours truly as the chair. And for a quorum, you have to get 2 of the government and 2 of the opposition, plus the chair. So this is not something, the Public Accounts Committee is not something unique in its constitution at the moment. We have another committee that is like that. And so if when I call a meeting of the Parliamentary Management Committee and I don't have 2 members from either side, the meeting can't go on. And I've had for almost a year and a half when, and I stand corrected on the time frame, but a long time, when I called meetings and I didn't have the quorum based on the 2-2 formula. So again,
and that's my question, Mr. Speaker. Is that good for democracy? That's my question.
And it's good for democracy. It's good for democracy. Yes, because let's take the part. I can speak from the Parliamentary Management Committee perspective because I'm integrally involved in that. And so you want to ensure that the 2 sides are present, and especially in certain numbers, so that you can have that healthy debate and a consensus coming out. And sometimes you don't get a consensus. So this is one of the checks and balances. Sometimes it works really good, and sometimes it works with a delayed mechanism. And so why it's good for democracy? Because it gives some amount of veto power on the hand of whoever's going to exercise that particular initiative. And that's a right, and it's a good check and balance, I think.
Dr. Rose?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, some people say, let me play the devil's advocate, but I'm not a devil, so I'll play the good advocate. Now, first of all, let me say this. No one has a right to touch a mace. If anyone, an MP in Parliament, does not know the significance of a mace, then they ought not to be in Parliament. No one has the right to touch it, or to pull it, or to drag it, or to throw it. I fully stand by that. But my question to you is this. If those MPs from APNU would touch the mace or pull it, drag the mace down, whatever it is, I'd apologize to you. Would you have still imposed sanctions on them?
Hindsight is perfect vision. I tend to be a person who would try to put my own personal feelings aside for the betterment of the whole.
Right.
So there would have been a good chance. There would have been a good chance.
Okay, that's what I want to know. Now, Mr. Speaker, some people are saying that you are an advocate of the government in Parliament. And this is, Mr. Speaker, I'm telling you this tonight. I've not been able to ask you no questions for myself. It's all coming through from our viewers, and they bombarded my phone tonight. Maybe you're very popular. They're saying that you're an advocate for the government side, and you don't care about the opposition. True or false, I don't know. But my question to you is this. Why some people think that way? What have you done to give them the reason to even think that way?
We have a divisive society,
Right.
and so we'll always have that. But I was speaking to one MP, and he said to me, "Man, you're very generous with the opposition today. I apply the rules. So if the rules come down on the side of being generous to the opposition, then so be it. I apply the rules. I can't advocate for any side. All I can do is adjudicate. Adjudicate based on the rules before me. So if one side contravenes the rules more than the other side, I will have to come down harder on the contraveners of the rules. And so my job is to advocate. My job is not to defend a government policy and support an opposition initiative or adjudicate. The Parliament is an institution for making legislations, keeping the government on its toes. Private citizens can approach the Parliament. My job is to ensure the business of the Parliament is conducted and conducted especially successfully.
I'm going to pose a very difficult question to you, but I know you're a man of history. You can answer it. My question to you is this. Guyana had a number of speakers. I think it's about, since independence, it was about 6 or 7 of them. I think you're the 8th speaker. I'm not 100% sure. But my question to you is this. How would you assess the last Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Scotland? What's his last name? Barclay?
Barton, Scotland.
Barton, Scotland. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate him? The way he handled Parliament, the way he controlled the protocols and the code of conduct and everything else in Parliament. How would you scale him?
Barton is a very good friend of mine and a great Guyanese, and I have a lot of respect for him.
Now I'll give him a scaling. On a scale of 1 to 10.
As a person, as a good Guyanese and a good friend, 10 plus.
Okay. Now, as Speaker of the National Assembly, tell our listeners tonight, what would you like to see? What changes would you like to see in the National Assembly or in Parliament, whatever? If you have the ability to make those changes or the authority to make those changes.
Primarily, our citizens have to have faith, confidence in our National Assembly. And I would like to continue to contribute to that. And in so doing, we have introduced a number of initiatives to continue to bring our parliamentarians closer to the people, our National Assembly closer to the people. And so let us continue to use institutions of democracy to the maximum, because the alternative would provide no winners. And I've always maintained there are no winners in wars. So let dialogue continue. And the place for representative dialogue and representing the people and developing the country is the National Assembly and the Parliament. And let the business be done respectfully, within the rules, and let us build confidence among our people that our institutions of democracy function and function well. And that is what I'd like to see. Hence our emphasis on the issue of youth in Parliament. So we have done quite a bit of work on reaching out to young people, literally from the time they are born to when they are young adults and a bit older adults. Our debating competition has taken off. This is the third year. This year we had 50 regional debates and 16 national debates. And our young parliamentarians get an opportunity also to interact with other young people in politics. There are, I think, about 16 young people at this conference, and they're going to be engaging in the Commonwealth Caribbean Youth Parliament on Wednesday, and Guyana has 2 of them at this conference, the 2 representing winners from our youth parliament in previous years. So your question is, this is what I would like to see, the confidence of our people in our democratic institutions, and we continue to work to build that confidence.
Now, Mr. Speaker, in all fairness to you, Parliament is the premier lawmaking body in the country, and you're placed in the center of 2 forces, opposition and the government. So you have to navigate and balance a very, very walking a thin rope there. My question to you is this. You were a minister before, and now you're the speaker. Which job is tougher?
I think all have equal simplicity and easiness. I never found the job as member of parliament, minister, and the speaker that taxing. If you want to serve people, it's the happiest time when you're a member of parliament, a minister, or the speaker, because you get to do what you like, serving people. And so it could be plenty work. It could be plenty sometimes every week. People don't see this other aspect of the speaker work. The questions that come in, the sitting and vetting, the visits to parliament. And this year we've had over 5,000 kids in the last couple of months passing through parliament, you know. So there are other work that happens, dealing with the commissions, because many of the commissions have to present their report to Parliament, to the Speaker. The overseas representation, it's important. It could be plentiful, but serving people for me is a joy, and I don't refuse to take a call. If I don't answer the phone, you too know I will call you back. It's not because you're Charles Sugrim and Dr. Asquith. A number comes into my phone, I don't know it, I don't see it, I see a name next to it. I return it because it's important to that caller, make they call you. So pay them the respect of returning a call. And I've said, let us continue as politicians and as representatives of the people to be accessible to people. And many times you can't, when you're a minister, you can't do anything because people want you to flex on a policy or a law. But you sit down, you give them an ear and said, if you're my friend, please don't ask me to do this, right? If you insist and you want me to do it, but then I'll compromise myself, but that's the last you will see of me here in this position, right? So Asquith and viewers, for me, it's a great honor to be serving people for this long. I know Charles close to 37 years and been in serving people for 43 years. And I haven't gotten tired of it, and it hasn't caused me any extra amount of gray hair. So I enjoy working with people, serving people, and as long as I'm given the opportunity to, I will continue to execute my responsibility with openness, with fairness, and with accessibility. People must be able to meet me and see me, touch me, talk to me, whenever, wherever, however. I have always had my home telephone number in the telephone directory. It's always been in there. So when my friends tell me, oh, we can't get you, said, did you ever check the telephone directory? It's never been out of the directory. And I don't get, good thing or bad thing, I don't get the calls that harass. So maybe I've done something good.
Courtesy, you're one of a kind to do that. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know speakers do have a staff, a personal staff. Do you have a personal staff? And if so, name their positions.
Yes, we do have personal staff. I have a personal assistant, and I have a secretary. The secretary of the speaker has served all the speakers since 69. So she has gone through Cisnarine, Derek Jagan, Martin Zephyr, Ralph Ramkaran, Raphael Trotman, Barton Scotland, Manzoor Nadir. So I think you had 9 speakers, and she has served 7 of them. So outside of that, we can draw on the staff from committees, public relations. There are a number of other support staff that we have, and we've been able to do quite a bit. One of the things that I always commend the clerk for is, I said he has done a good job in choosing good people to work at the Parliament. And so Sherlock and the staff of Parliament, let me publicly pay my commendation to them, my thanks to them for their work, their guidance, and total support.
Since you mentioned the 9 speakers, you mentioned the 9 including you or 9 plus you?
I mentioned 7. I think there were 2 before. So that would,
okay, I have a quiz for you. Who was the first speaker since independence?
I know the name. It's not at the tip of my tongue, right?
I'll give you
Rahman Gadrej.
No, he was a pastor.
Wolford?
No.
I can't remember the name.
A.P. Allen.
A.P. Allen. Yes.
You know, I mentioned this to a few Guyanese and they told me I don't know what I'm talking about. A.P. Allen, I said he was the first speaker in 1966.
Since independence.
Yeah. Yes. Now, my other question to you is this. How many days per year, not the Accounts Committee, Parliament sits on an average to debate issues to pass?
Parliament would sit about 22 days on average a year, 22, 25 days. So right now, since September 2020, we are now on the 3rd of August. We're going to be having our 66th sitting. So in the 3 years of the government, you would have had 66 sittings of Parliament.
So that's why someone texts me and says, if you become an MP, you'll have the longest vacation in the world. Because if Parliament sits 22 days a year and some members are not in committees, then they don't have to be in Parliament.
But this is the issue that the Westminster system has. right? Remember, we are drawing the ministers, i.e. the executive, from Parliament.
Right.
So if we have Parliament 2 times a week, 3 times a week, those MPs have to now be out of their office and sitting in Parliament. We are not a Parliament with 200 and every minister has 1 or 2 ministers of state. So in some of the bigger democracies, you'd have, sometimes when you look at their parliament, if they have 600 people, you probably barely have 200, whatever is the quorum. So people are allowed to go out into the constituencies. Ministers can be, wherever. Ministers, you hardly even see them in some countries. They come when their business is in the house. So that's not an accurate statement that you're on vacation. And so we also do not have full-time members of parliament. So members of parliament have their jobs, their regular jobs that they have to do. They have their jobs. So they still have to do their jobs to earn a living, to provide for their families and themselves. In the American type system, which some countries have adopted, the executive is not drawn from the parliament. So your ministers come from outside of the parliament. So the parliament could sit as often as it wants. And even then, it don't sit every day. So we have a neighbor in Suriname where the ministers are not in parliament. And they have even more log jams than us. So there isn't a blueprint as yet that can clearly define this structure was better than another structure. We're dealing with people. We're dealing with people. And in dealing with people, you can't have one size fit all. And so those who speak about Parliament having the longest vacation speak out of a position of lack of information, i.e. ignorance.
How many years you have to be a member of parliament before you can get a parliamentary pension?
I think it's 5 years. It could be 5 or 4, I can't remember. We had adjusted it some time ago, but it's 4 or 5 years and you get a parliament. I think it's similarly a person in the public service, once they are in the establishment, 5 years, pensionable, you get a pension.
Okay. Now, my last question before my colleague Charles comes on. What, as you have studied parliamentary rules and laws going back to bills and everything else, what is one of the worst laws or bills this our country has ever passed in parliament, do you think? Or you can name 2 or you can name 3.
A difficult one.
Difficult?
A very difficult one. But I would say laws which I abhor are laws that are going to restrict the freedoms of people. I made mention of this in doing a tribute 2 Fridays ago at the funeral of the late Ashton Chase, one of the founder members of parliament and government in Guyana. And Ashton was speaking in 1965 on the 14th of July on a motion to extend, in 1965, the state of emergency in Guyana. When we'd already passed through the riots, 176 persons being killed and 1,100 being maimed, and we had matters settled, and we were extending the state of emergency. And he criticized that And if there was one piece of legislation, I would say I would go back to that piece of legislation, because the only reason you would want to extend a state of emergency is to use emergency powers, i.e. being undemocratic.
This is, but Charles, let me just ask this question. This came from Queens, Sarwan. He started his last time, he didn't put it through. He says one of the worst laws this country ever had was the law where you can't have dual citizenship and be a member of parliament. He says he don't know of any country that has that. In the United States, you can be a senator, you can come from another country. The only thing you can't be is the president if you're born outside of the United States. So he said, why we follow the United States, why don't we follow the United States on that? Jamaica can be a citizenship of any other country and be a member of parliament and so forth, trainer. Why in Guyana we have that laws? That's the question he's asking. And he said that's the thing has been passed.
Yeah, but I would want to lend a lot of support to that view. But I'll give you the history behind it.
Okay.
I personally, I can't remember when we changed the constitution in 2000 that was there. I have to go back and do some research, and as a promise to Sarwan, I will do the research, because all of the transcripts that for the process that we had the constitution changes in 2000, they still exist and in the records of Parliament. And I sat through all of those discussions, and I can't remember anybody advocating for that, right? So it was always that you can be dual citizen and be president. You can be dual citizen and be a minister. You can be a dual citizen and be a member of parliament. So I remember Dr. Leslie Ramsamy was challenged, and his nomination went to court and was dismissed. But then 2007 came, and I want to believe the cut and paste system that may have been applied used the Trinidad model, and that is how it infected. And I'm using strong words because I feel it should not happen.
So you support someone with dual citizenship to be a member of parliament, to be ministers and so forth?
Yes.
Okay. Charles?
Mr. Speaker, we have limited time left. In the last government, there was report in the press that the food bill for sitting of National Assembly is about $750,000 per sitting. That's for meals. What is the current?
That might be cheap.
What's the current cost now per day for a sitting of Parliament for meals?
Again, people speak out of lack of facts, i.e. ignorance. So the food bill of Parliament is not only the members of Parliament. You have 65 elected, you have the technocrat ministers. So what you have, including the Speaker, you may have about 70. So you have that. Then you have, if we're meeting in the mornings, sometimes a lot of the members of Parliament need a snack, right? Then you have to have lunch. And you do have to provide dinner if you're going to go late. So it's not one meal. You technically have 3 meals for the MPs. Then you have, at any one sitting, you probably have about 70 staff that need to have meals, working. You have to provide for them. Then you have the media. Then you have the police, the security. You have also persons with drivers. They're members of Parliament, not necessarily ministers. What are you going to say? Oh, Manzu driver could eat, but your driver can't eat. So people are narrow-minded.
No,
So
no,
when you
Minister,
start looking,
Mr. Speaker, it's not, we not, I know the numbers are many. What's the average cost per meal per day when Parliament sits that the Guyanese people?
it depends from, I hazard a guess, maybe 3,000 to 5. It's nothing extravagant. We don't sit down and eat lobster and conch,
Okay,
right?
let's quickly
Sometimes
talk.
we get bora and shrimp, little duck, dal, okra, metangi, fried fish.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Mr. Speaker, quickly the financial papers. When can the government bring a supplementary paper for additional funding? What must be the reason to submit that kind of supplementary budget?
Yes, the budget, the paper has to cover items that were unforeseen, emergency, and sometimes to accommodate inflows. Because let's say we made an application for a loan a year and a half ago, and it went through all the systems, and we waited so long we didn't even think it was going to come through, and then a week after budget it came through. So now we have to make the provisions on the supplementaries to bring the money in and to expend it.
Okay, all right.
So
now,
the other thing is, in terms of the supplementary papers that will come, so you'd have all of these emergency expenditure, unforeseen expenditure coming. The government has the contingency fund which they can spend a certain percentage of the budget. But when you reach that ceiling, you have to clear it by a supplementary paper, or else you don't have that wiggle room anymore. So you'd have to bring a supplementary paper to clear the contingency fund, because you always need to have your contingencies. It's like your emergency funds at home. If you use it up, you got to replenish it, right? So this is the other aspect of the supplementary papers.
Okay, you mentioned in your opening remark about some of the things that the government is doing. How serious is our government with climate change, in your view?
Very, very serious.
So then, Mr. Speaker, if that is true, and I believe what you said is true, why are we spending so much money in the coastland when we know in about 10, 15 years, all will be underwater? We are spending billions of dollars, as you just mentioned in the beginning, to build 2 more canals like the Hope Canal, instead of building dams to protect our water and the conserves. Now El Nino is going to happen now. So we are wasting water to go into the Atlantic when there is need for water, there is none. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, we are spending so much money along the coast, as I said, all will go to nothing, because as we know, Guyana is below sea level, and with the rise of the sea, most of our coastland will be underwater in a not too distant future. So we talk on the one hand about climate change, but we're doing exactly the opposite in our spending.
I'm not here to defend the government, but I've been in so many climate change discussion. In fact, I just an hour and a half, 2 just before we came online, we just ended a climate change discussion. This issue of where to spend the money is not a black and white situation, and people will have preference. Look, the Conservancy was built by encaptured people centuries ago. And when you fly up, you see it. So the issue is, it served a population of 1 million people, right? And it seems sufficient. For me, the issue is going to be, how are we going to retain more water while at the same time allowing for draining the excess? But how are we going to retain enough water to deal with a population of 3 million in perhaps 8 to 10 years? And it's not that the Guyanese population will grow to 3 million. What you do, you probably have 750,000 workers, you probably have 500,000 tourists, and you have 500,000 illegal workers and refugees. So all will have to happen. So as a government, whoever's in government will have to start looking at some of what you've just mentioned. I see, and I text the Minister of Housing and Water, because with all these people, we're going to have to deal with treating raw sewage. And I was so pleased to open the papers yesterday and to see that we are looking at $40 million for sewage treatment. So right now, we just go to the Kingston area or one of the outfalls, the tankers go and just pump everything out, right? And with all those people, that amount of effluent coming out from us into the pipes and into will not be too good. So this is a judgment call. And for me, we've seen some of the impact of climate change. I normally would judge whether El Nino will come in based on how far I see the bottom of the trenches in the canals. And we had rainfall today. I guarantee you tomorrow, the next day, you'll almost see only about 8 to 12 inches of water in some of those canals. And that is the kind of change. Having been around so long and around some of these canals, you see the patterns, right? But it's something that is not a joke. It's something that is real. It's like the Ukraine war. People, the Russians and some people are saying, no, there's not a war. This thing is happening and people are denying it. So I know from my interaction, everyone in Guyana, they're serious, because I've been to conferences with government and opposition persons on climate change, right? The Minister of the Environment, Mr. the Honorable Vikram Bharat, and opposition member and I were in Uruguay last year dealing with climate change, looking at some of the examples of adaptation and mitigation which they have put in place. And so whoever is not serious about climate change, certainly living with their head in the sand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I'm saying is that we are all serious about climate change, but in my view and the view of many, we are misdirecting our resource, which will not be a benefit in the not too distant future. But that's a different discussion altogether.
But again, that is a judgment call, you know.
Yeah, I know, but we can't be saying one thing, Mr. Speaker, that there is climate change, we are below sea level, and we're still spending billions and billions and billions of dollars in our coastline, when we know in not too distant future, it will not be there. But that's a different discussion.
Let me be a good advocate like us, and look and see what's happening in Guyana. We might be seeing skyrocketing property values in Georgetown and a maintenance of what's happening in town. But when next time you go, let's take a drive and see how the development is being pushed along the East Bank to Lindian corridor. And from the time you reach the Eccles, you're out of danger. Basically, the only danger you will have is if the Conservancy breaks away. Then you are exposed to 4 feet of water in Eccles and going further up. But when you look at the plans for Silica City, when you look at the plans for the development along the corridor, Charles, ask it, when you drive that Mandela to Diamond Road, and you start looking and seeing what is happening, you'll see the development moving away. Some of the hotels that are being built is being built on that side, right? So the jury is not out as yet. Sorry, the jury is still out. The verdict didn't come in. So for this one, Charles, I would say temper your observations a bit with the reality that's happening on the ground. In fact, again, like you and Asquith, I do my daily review of what's in the news the first thing in the morning. And I saw His Excellency talking about Eco Lodge along that corridor and even more development, hospitals, whatever. So, and not only there, look at go to Lethem. I haven't been to Lethem in a while, and I went in May, and it's a different place. Look at what's going to happen in Linden, Bartica, right? So the reality is you have 70% of the population in a 30-mile arc from Parika to Temeri to Mahika, right? And so you will still have to service the population because that's where they are. You can't physically pick them up and send them somewhere else. You know, people, that's democracy.
Mr. Speaker, that's a different discussion. I hope we can come back on. I know you don't speak on behalf of the government, but we'll talk about that in a different way. We're closing time now, Mr. Speaker. Anything in closing?
Again, it's always an honor to be with you gentlemen. Continue to do the work in terms of sensitizing people. It's always a very thin line for you guys to walk with your own opinion and trying to have a balanced view from your guests and also your viewers. Continue to do it because, again, as I say, you know, providing information to people will help improve the discussion. And so I commend Mr. Singh for continuing this program. And we are available anytime to have a discussion on anything which is within my purview.
And we want to wish you well, Mr. Speaker, in your trip to the Turkan Caicos with your team there. And I hope that you get back home safe after a successful trip.
Yes, we actually have a team comprising the Honorable Member Sherrod Duncan. Frank Anthony is presenting tomorrow on the issue of health in the Caribbean and in Guyana. And it's been a good experience hearing from persons in the region and listening to what are some of the solutions and how we can fashion policies to make the Caribbean speak with one voice as we go outside to represent our people in other international fora. So thanks once again for having me on your program, gentlemen. Dr. Rose, again, thank you very much. Charles, it's always an honor to be with you.
Thank you. Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for coming on. I know you're not home and everything else, but normally I am very tough on public servants because the way they treat the public. But I had a different experience over the weekend and this morning. The Ministry of Youth, Culture and Sports have the most courteous staff I ever came across in Guyana. Especially Ms. Tabika Boswain, she's the director of the Youth, Culture and Sports Department. Ms. Hema Singh, she is the Minister's Principal Secretary, and Ms. Marisa Beat, and all the rest of the staff. They're extremely courteous. I was stunned at the courtesy I received from these people. Unlike other ministries, you're walking them, they don't have to, but these people make sure that you're well served. So a shout out to all of them. Ms. Tamika Boswain, Ms. Hema Singh, Hema Singh, and Ms. Marisa Beat. Congratulations for such courtesy you provided to me. And I'm sure you're doing it for all the people that come in there. Thank you.
Dr. Rose, you're allowed to practice Indian names some more. So it's
What's the name? H-A-Y-M.
should be Hema. Should be Hema Singh.
Hema
that's
Singh,
okay.
but I said that.
Anyway, to our audience out there, we want to thank you so much for being with us. We want to thank the speaker for taking his time out to be with us. And until the next time, God bless our great country of Guyana. Thank you so much.